good day to you. May you all be well, and may you all be at peace. And like it says in the song, may you always do for others and let others do for you. I am actually this is the first of a series that I was planning on doing, related to the lives of people who are truly excellent human beings. People who led extraordinary lives, just so that you and I could lead ordinary ones, who made the world really special, really beautiful. And just like all my other presentations, of course, then just also like my, what do you call it, just like my adrenaline-fueled life, these two are completely unscripted and unedited. That's how it should be, because if I was telling something that I truly believe in, I don't need to create a story about them. It is there. It speaks for itself. So anyway, be all that as it may, this may be a little bit longer than what I'm planning, but bear with me. Today, I am going to talk to you about a person you have probably never heard of. His name is Kumudu Pinto. He was a teacher. And of course, there are many, many teachers in the world. But very few of them actually do much more than learn something from outside and then parrot it out to someone else. Even in life, a lot of us pass through it, touching but few people in our jobs, in our careers, in our personal life. We just have the very few people that we actually touch. And even lesser that we edify, that we improve, that we make better. Pinto was different. Literally thousands of young children, youth, men and women, boys and girls, passed through him. And if I were to ask every one of them, they would have their own tale, their own story about how Pinto enhanced them. But at the same time, very few of them remember him. If asked, they will, but if not, Pinto would be just some spike in their thoughts that flitted through the transom of their minds and was gone. And that itself is a testimony to the greatness of the man. He gave not for reward. He did not give at all for recognition. This is his tale. I mean, not the tale. I mean, his tale is like, I can write books about him, but these are some incidents that highlight how he impacted me and perhaps some others as well. He was at East West Computer Training Center when I first met him as a young kid. I would call myself a kid of 23. When I went there to teach, I think Pascal and assembler language and a couple of these things. I was a computer person. And there were a few others as well with me. It was quite an interesting bunch of people. We were all young teachers, not more than 25, 26. The oldest was about 25, 26. There was Banu, who was this calm, solid, knowledgeable guy. There was Manori with an E, who was this bubbly ball of laughter. There was Manori with an I, who was like this. She had this she was like something like a smoldering coal inside, but she had this really stoic smile outside that you could see. There was Imtiaz, who was a kamikaze pilot, literally, smart as hell. There was also Ransith, my erstwhile chess partner, and he was the epitome of rationale and logic, and there was me. And hanging over all of us was Mr. Pinto, who headed up the training center. He was a teacher. And, well, all of us were just finding our way in how to impart knowledge of computers to other people. We were all very smart, we were all very knowledgeable in our skills, and we thought we could do it. To some extent, yes, that was true. But there was an incident I'm going to tell you about, which showed me gave me a new idea of what teaching was all about. And this has to do with the visit there of a guy called Dr. Suarez, who came from England, from America. He was in Silicon Valley, and he was one of the people who was critical in the creation of the x86 chip for Intel. And he gave us a lecture, and I remember going back to Mr. Pinto. Pinto didn't attend the lecture. I went back to him, and I was all agog with what I had learned, and I was, well, that's my coffee, and I was all agog with what I had learned, and I was explaining to him, like, the difference between the brilliance of the Barrow's 6800 mechanism of stacked philo registers and the misery that was the x86 methodology of using fence registers. Pinto was listening to this for a while, and at some point he stopped me and he said, "I am disappointed in you." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he said, "Before you came here, I know your history. You used to work on a dam, and there you shucked concrete by the cubic meter from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. in the night. You did something because of your work. Something happened, a dam was created. And you come here and you tell me the greatness of one conceptual idea over another." And you were very quiet. I was like, wow. And I was like, and he said, "That is not you. That is not the type of person that I wanted you to be. That is not the type of person that you are." And he said something. He said, "Remember, Arjuna, those who can truly do can truly teach. Those who can't do can't know, and if they can't know, they can't teach." Hit me between the eyes, man. I'm telling you. It just shattered me. I was so full of the shit I was with. All the knowledge, all the theory, all the application, all the mechanics, all the systemic methodologies. That was perfect in my mind, and I knew it was useless. And he said, "Can you make a computer that is better than Barrow's? Is better than Intel? If you can, that day I will say, okay, there was something that you gained from that lecture. Otherwise, you are just gratifying yourself by that comparison." And that changed me, man. You know what I did? I stopped doing Pascal, I stopped doing Fortran, I stopped doing assembly. I mean, I taught those things, but I stopped wanking to the idea of the idea. And you know what I did? I started playing a computer game called Digger. I played it morning, noon and night at the training center until I became the best ever at it. When I beat all the records, the next morning, Pinto just casually takes me aside and he says, "I'm proud of you." And he said, "You did something. You played Digger to the point where nobody else can play Digger like you. You didn't compare Digger to Space Invaders. You didn't try to figure out whether there was a better way of creating Digger. You didn't try to analyze whether or not digger was created by a maniac or whether it was created by an idiot. You were not trying to figure out why digger was created in the first place. You were not trying to improve digger. You played it and you won. Well, that's doing. And I wasn't actually thinking that in my head that I was actually doing something, but I think that initial talk sort of gave me this idea, and I actually completed one thing. I did it so thoroughly that nobody could do it as well as I could do it. It was not an ego thing. It was a practical, factual yes. And that was when Pinto smiled at me and said, I have nothing more I can teach you. You now know how to teach. I was, things were swirling around me. I said, what do you mean by I know how to teach? I thought I knew how to teach. He said, no, you didn't. You knew how to educate. Teaching is an entirely different thing. It requires you to be completely one with what you are teaching. Your skill has to be proven on the ground. And you don't have to learn Pascal to teach Pascal. If you have proven something on the ground in something else, you will be able to use that knowledge to be able to teach Pascal to a level nobody else can. And that was what it was. And what Pinto said at that point was very important to me. He said, essentially, anybody can learn someone to do, but very few people can teach someone to teach. Not only must the teacher be at a phenomenal level of egolessness, but the potential next generation teacher must be the same. And that, at 23, I said bye-bye to my ego. I think from that point onwards, I subsumed myself into the idea of teaching, whether it was in IT or in one of the many other things that I did subsequently. The idea of teaching comes from the idea of acquiring things purely for the joy of knowing, and the acquiring of that knowledge cannot be done by learning. You do it, acquire it by doing. And then suddenly he was not there. I remember the day he became a monk. See, with Pinto, the important thing was that, the reason why he goes under everyone's radar is because all of his doing, all of his teaching, all of his knowledge was subsumed because he had subsumed his ego. It was almost as if everything he gave looked as if it belonged to someone else and not to him. And that is actually the target of a true teacher. And I remember the day that he left, we had a party, and everyone was bawling their heads off. I wasn't bawling my head off because I was also halfway to becoming a monk at that time. I remember Dipu, I think it was. Yeah, Dipu. I've forgotten Dipu. My God, I forgot Dipu. Dipu was there. Dipu was, she was like this. She was really pretty, I remember at that point. And and she was very smart too. And, it is this beautiful person. And she was crying. And she said, it is almost as if Pinto had died. Which is true. He was not somebody that could, from that point onwards, be accessed. He was inaccessible. And that was when I realized the extent to which Pinto had touched all of the teachers, the young teachers at East West. The bind was so great without him actually trying. Without trying. We fast forward 5 years from that point onwards. And he is back. He is no longer a monk. I went to meet him at Metropolitan. He was deeply conflicted. He was worried about himself and the idea of himself to himself. So he was, on the one side, this beautiful man who had logically, rationally decided that the only way to learn the ultimate of physics was to move beyond physics and go into metaphysics. And who has come back perhaps thinking that didn't work out. And from that point onwards, I made it a point to be extremely close to him. And I actually went and got a job with him, or rather not with him, but in the same organization, just so that I could be close to this man and help him as much as I could while he continued to edify me. And I remember we were teaching at the Chartered Institute of Accountants, and we did something that very few people are able to do. We taught the same class at the same time. He would start a sentence and I would complete it. Such was the mental bind between the two of us. But the conflict just still remained. I did my best at that point, and each time I did something like that, I remembered all of the other young teachers at East West, and I found them mentally, psychological, like standing behind me as I was speaking to him, because they were no longer in the country. I was actually in some ways a spokesman for them as well. And Pinto suffered. He suffered the fact that he was not a monk. He suffered the fact that he was now in a place that he thought was better than being a monk. So he was like conflicted in every way. And one day, his brother calls me up. I was at that point, what I was doing, I can't remember. I think I was doing advertising at that point. I'm not too sure what I was doing. I did a lot of things. But I said, Pinto is unable to speak. He is unable to breathe. He is refusing to go to the hospital. Can you come? So I dropped everything I was doing and I just got into a tuk and I rushed over to Kolonnaga and to his house. The minute he saw me, he started speaking, he started breathing. Such was the symbiosis between the two of us, that just our presence in each other's lives kind of cured him. I don't know why, but that was how it happened. And at that point I realized that there was something special in the way in which we interacted with each other, not as teacher and student, but as teacher and teacher. The next time I was at home, it was 10 in the night. At that time I was more of a playboy than a drug addict than anything else. I get another frantic call from the brother saying, Pinto can't breathe, Pinto can't speak, Pinto is dying. And I just want to bring him to you because I don't know what to do. So I said, please, I'll try to do whatever I can, but sure, go, bring him. So I kicked all the women out along with their drugs and their smokes and their booze, which was a bit strange for me, but anyway, I did that. And Pinto comes in and he looks a bloody fright, I'm telling you. He looked crazy. He was not able to speak at all. And he had all this, the Chinese anti-headache plaster, he had cut diamonds of it out and he had pasted it all over his face, diamond here, diamond here, diamond here, diamond here, and it looks like some kind of demon harlequin there, And I just brought him in. His brother fled. And I sat with him on the ground. I remember it was like 10:30 when he came until 3 in the morning. Talking, and suddenly at some point he was trying to respond, just joking. And someone, I can speak. And then after another 2 hours, I can breathe. And I was like thanking every god there was, including some that I had invented at that point. And then he said something to me that was supreme to me personally. He said, Arjuna, there is no one else in this world who could have done what you did for me today. And guys, I can't think of a greater compliment for a student than to have his teacher tell him that. And I said, so to him. I said, for a student, there is nothing more. For a student, that is the vindication and the validation of his life. And he smiled at me and said, Arjuna, you were never a student. You were always a teacher. Guys, it's fascinating. We fast forward another 2 years. We are both at his institute. I was teaching to help him. And then we were both seated there, and there were a bunch of my students and a bunch of his students. And then most of his students left, and a couple of my students were struggling along. And then he again takes me aside and he said, Arjuna, just look at this. I teach. You teach. Once I have given them what they require, once they are improved and bettered, I ask them, I request them, I plead with them, I beg them to stay. And none of them do. They're gone. Then we look at you. You give them what they want. You edify them, you change them, perhaps you improve them. He says, I don't know. And then you tell them, you ask them, you beg them, you plead with them, you order them to leave you and get on with their lives, and they stick to you like leeches. I want them to stay, and they don't. You want them to go, and they don't. Which of us suffers more? So I think we both suffer, and the intensity of the suffering is the same, even though the channel of the pain is different. Fast forward another 5 years. Pinto tells me, Arjuna, I am done. I do not know what to do now. And this was his conflict coming out and talking. And I said, Pinto, there are 2 channels I can see for you. You cannot live life with half your mind in metaphysics and half your mind in physics. So on the one side, you can either relinquish physics and the material world completely and go back to the metaphysics and the spiritual world, or you can reject metaphysics and the spiritual world and get back to physics and the material world. And then I was on the phone with him at that point. I was at the Green Movement, and he said, there's a third option. I said, what? And he said, I die. I heard that like, it's this sinking feeling inside me. And I said, sir, that does not advance the action either way. And he said, no, it doesn't, but I can kick the can down the road. I can postpone the decision if I die. And I remember speaking to him for half an hour, no, more than that. I don't know what I said to him. I was trying my best to convince him that life is sacrosanct, that life is precious. One week later, he had stopped breathing. I don't think he died, more like he left his body. He was taken to hospital, unable to breathe, unable to speak, and this time he did not call me at all. I heard of it later on. I didn't go for his funeral. I don't believe in looking at a dead carcass. Instead, I sat in the jungles of Kataragama and I meditated for 2 whole days. That was better for me. And that was Pinto. He died as he lived, with very few people knowing the extent and the phenom of his mind and his heart and his intellect and his doing. Very few people are like that. And they did lots for many people like me. I colored my entire life according to the gentle teasing of his suggestions. And I have grown up to be a fairly decent person as a result. And so did thousands of others. I remember I wrote a poem for a different. It was for the person who, for the lady actually, who taught me archery. She was similar. I think it applies just as much to Pinto, and I will not. The gender issue is there, but actually, it doesn't really matter here because Pinto was gay. He was a homosexual. So that poem, it goes something like this. I was born in storm of roses of thorn, into murk made of mixture of sorrow, of song, and fell to a ground to feed from a soil full of serpent in turmoil and tiger in toil. But her dark eyes sliced through the fear to the fall, past a mind milking madness to a heart held in thrall, and cheating my destiny of sequential living, she fled with my soul when life wasn't looking to stop me, to stare. For now, forever, into dreams made of rhythm, of moonlight, of heather, to mesh me in dreams tossed in scent, soaked in starshine, misted with gossamer, dusted with firefly, to feed me on tunes made of tremble and sigh, as earth whispered her love to the sea, to the sky. In fact, that poem is actually a dedication to all true doers who became true teachers. Men and women who toiled for us, who sweated their lives' blood, who wept their hearts' tears, and sacrificed their lives on the altar of the living dead, who became desiccated wrecks and apologies for human beings. Just so that you and I could see. Just so that you and I could do.